Is Jalen your starter next week? And if so, what will the challenge be, now that more tape is out on him?
I'm gonna enjoy this one. I'm gonna go home and relax and be with my family tonight and enjoy this win and get ready for the week.
The jury's out for Peterson. How about the fellas? What's going on, everybody? Welcome into First Take. Hope you all had a wonderful weekend. Stephen A., Dan, Max, I'm Molly. Let's get right into it. And Max, I'm going to come to you in this one. Jalen Hurts getting the first start of his career, and he gets a win against a Super Bowl favorite, the Saints, one of the best defenses in football. This certainly doesn't help Wentz. Max, do you think Hurts has officially taken Carson's job?
Yes. Officially, I don't know, because they won't come out and say it. Because that coach, Doug Peterson, looks scared, like he doesn't have autonomy. Guys, the Eagles have been a different football team over the last almost 6 quarters. A different football team. And it's not the first time we've seen this. Like, Nick Foles takes Carson Wentz's job because of injury. Carson Wentz was having a great year. But Nick Foles is the one that went on the Super Bowl run and won Super Bowl MVP. And then the next year, Carson Wentz was 5-6, and the Eagles were flat. They were dead in the water. They weren't going anywhere. Wentz gets hurt again. Foles takes over. They catch fire. They get to the playoffs somehow, start at 5-6. He gets them to the playoffs. Beats the Bears, throws a perfect pass, goes through his receiver's hands, or else they also beat the Saints to get to the NFC Championship game in the next season. This is like, it keeps happening. By the way, last year in the playoffs, a 40-year-old Josh McCown comes in, with a torn hamstring, and they lost to Seattle by the same margin they lost with Wentz week 12 of that season, right? Like, the team does not function with Wentz, I think, because he won't run the offense. Now, before you talk to me about the offensive line, according to ESPN Analytics, the Eagles' offensive line in pass blocking win rate is 11th in the league. Run blocking, it's better, but pass blocking is 11th in the league. But it's the offensive line, right? Because look how much Carson Wentz is getting sacked. In that case, a rookie second-round pick making his first start against the NFL's best defense should have been sacked 1 million times. How many times was he sacked? 0. He was sacked 0. Now, does his mobility help him? Sure, right? Like the Sanders run set up by the fact that they're afraid he keeps the ball. Jalen Hurts keeps the ball. He freezes not only the defensive end, but the linebackers for a second. And that definitely helps things. But that doesn't explain why he doesn't get sacked at all. Randall Cunningham was sacked 60 times one season, 72 times another season. Just because you're mobile, if you're playing behind a bad offensive line, in fact, you will get sacked. That didn't happen. Maybe it's because Jalen Hurts will simply run the offense. And it's not that he looked, oh my God, amazing. It's that he wasn't making the stupid mistakes that Carson Wentz makes every single week, multiple times a game. Guys, you owe the offensive line an apology, both of you, for harping on that, because it seems to function fine without Carson Wentz. And the time to fix Wentz was months ago. It's too late. By the way, behind that same offensive line where Hurts didn't get sacked once, Carson Wentz has been the worst statistical starter in the NFL this year. The worst. No. Carson Wentz's days as the Eagles starting quarterback are over.
Well, first of all, let's not start off the show on a Monday morning saying asinine statements like we owe the offensive line an apology. We watched what we watched. We saw what we saw. We didn't completely absolve Carson Wentz from blame. But at the same time, we had to acknowledge the fact that the offensive line didn't have some great games. They played a great game yesterday. It was one of their better games. You have a guy in Jalen Hurts that scrambled out of the pocket on at least 3 occasions, ran the ball effectively in the first half, clearly was throwing the football relatively decently, and he gave them a spark. I think the profound argument to make against Carson Wentz is his unwillingness to listen, because he's got an elevated level of cachet, and as a result, because of that and not listening, that may have compromised the success of the team. But there is such a word as humility. You might not know much about that, Max. I don't know. I know I might. I know I do. But I will tell you this. At the end of the day, when you look at a Carson Wentz, the question as to whether or not this is Hurts' team and his job is gone, Carson Wentz's job is gone. For this season, sure, because the season Carson Wentz has been so god-awful, he deserves to get benched for the rest of this season. But he's about 28 years of age. He's got a tremendous future ahead of him as far as I'm concerned if he could eliminate those mistakes. I'm not going to look at a guy that was a top 2 candidate for league MVP honors 3 years ago and suddenly say, you're finished, you're done because of a bad season. There are plenty of people throughout NFL history that have had bad seasons and have had the opportunity to come back, make amends, and did just that. I'm going to assume and surmise that that is Carson Wentz. We looked at him, we said he could throw the ball. We looked at him and said he could run with the football, that he could definitely inspire his teammates, et cetera, et cetera. We said those things in the past. Had I never saw those things in the past, that would be different. But because I have, I'm going to believe that it can happen again. It just doesn't need to happen this season because they don't need to be engaging in some kind of reclamation project in the heart of the season as you're trying to gear for a playoff run, trying to overcome whatever issues exist in the NFC East and end up in the playoffs yourself. It's too late for all of that. So Carson Wentz, in my opinion, should be finished for this season. In terms of moving ahead, in terms of his future being done in Philadelphia, hell no, I'm not going to say that. I need to see more from Hurts throwing the football before I make such a proclamation. I didn't see that yesterday, so I'm not going to take that position.
Yeah, I'll answer the question first. Yes, this is Jalen Hurts' job for the rest of the year. It was last week, okay? Yesterday just kind of put a stamp on that. Max, I'm a little disappointed in you, to be honest. Like, that shows, the last 5 minutes shows me that you're a better person than I am. Because if I were you, I would have buried me. You came out and were like a little bit of soft. I also think that it's important as a man to admit when you were wrong. So, Max, for the second time, I'm going to apologize to you. In this situation this year, you were right about Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts in the Eagles quarterback situation. I want to credit Jalen Hurts. He was a difference maker yesterday. He was decisive with the football. It helped their football team. He didn't hurt their football team with his use of his legs and getting outside of the pocket. That was outstanding. They asked him to be a spark. He was a consistent flame. So I want to credit Jalen Hurts for what he did yesterday. That being said, that offense was completely different, right? That was a completely different game plan, the way it was put together and then the way it was called. That football team played its best game of the year. That defense is the second worst defense in the NFL when it comes to takeaways. They get 2. They get 5 sacks, 3 and out. So that defense played a complete football game. I don't know why that happens. Like, that's where I am with Carson Wentz and this football team. Why? Why the disconnect between you and the way your team performs, specifically on the defensive side of the football? Why the disconnect between you and the way your coach calls a game? And that's where I want to take the conversation for me. I think that, like, what needs to happen with Wentz, whether it's in Philadelphia or moving forward, is you got to go back and sit down and talk with him about 2017 and what that did to him mentally. Watching someone else, your job gets ripped away from you because of injury, someone else takes your team to the Super Bowl. 2018, your job gets ripped away from you because of injury, someone takes your team to the playoffs. 2019, you put the team on your back and you carry them to the playoffs. Finally, you've overcome the demons of Nick Foles, and then all of a sudden the second round pick. You've got to figure out where he is here more than anywhere he is physically moving forward for Carson Wentz.
Okay, well, if you want to get buried, here comes the avalanche. Dan, he didn't do anything last year, put the team on his back.
That's
he
the
stunk
dumbest
last
comment
year.
of the day,
I tried to tell you that. He was regressing. He was regressing. Do you think he woke up one day and he became the worst quarterback in football? No,
Exactly.
It didn't happen overnight. And Stephen A., that's why when you say what he was 3 years ago, it took him 3 years, step by step, to get here. It's going to take years, step by step, to get back.
In that 3 year period, he throws for 81 touchdowns and 21 picks. It's never been done like that.
Okay, you keep...
But you can't just point to a single moment, Max.
Dan, you keep bringing that up. Are you denying it was step by step that he got here? You think he just fell off a cliff? Because I saw this last year. And the reason Carson Wentz, like, why does the team function better without Wentz? I never have questioned his toughness or his talent. He's extremely tough and he's talented, and I'm sure he's dedicated and wants to be great. He's arrogant and he has too much power in the organization. Think about how Trubisky acted when he was benched for Foles. Not because of injury, benched for Foles. Did he come out whining and pouting the way Carson Wentz did? No, he took it like a man. He was a good teammate and, in fact, showed leadership, and he's been playing well. because he understood, he internalized the criticism. Wentz, nothing he does, never anything wrong with Wentz, right? All of last year, you were even still saying he put the team on his back. He was lucky last year to be playing in a putrid division
his last
and got
6 or
healthy
7 games,
against
he
that
throws for
putrid
18
division.
touchdowns and 4 picks. He didn't have a receiver over 5. Like,
He
how
has?
come you can't? So he was lucky. He lucked himself into that performance for 6 or 7 straight weeks.
Yeah, he was lucky. He has high-end talent. He's capable of making a miracle throw a game and a couple of other really good ones. He made mistake after mistake in terms of mental mistakes and execution in that whole thing. So now he's been taken care of by the media. He obviously has power on the team. He has his own coach shook, afraid to say Jalen Hurts is the starter, afraid to even really praise Jalen Hurts. It will never work in Philly, Stephen A. The power dynamic is upside down, and Wentz still hasn't humbled himself.
Well, a couple of things. Number one, I never, ever feel like you should be allowed to mention the word cliff on this show. I'm just saying the word cliff should be omitted from your vocabulary. You know why. That's number one. Number two, I will say this in all seriousness. My mentality is a little bit different from y'all's from this perspective. Dan, you're a former player that's doing commentary. Max, you've been a commentator pretty much your entire career. I started off as a reporter. So basically what you're doing is you're chronicling step by step by step. Like, for example, I'm on soap opera. So guess what? I'm on a soap opera General Hospital. Even though you know the star is going to live no matter what happens, it still doesn't prevent you from telling the story. That's why I don't leapfrog Max from a Carson Wentz 3 years ago to what he is now. And we talk about the constant regression. The reason why I say that is because if I were covering the Eagles, what would happen, Max, is that I would go into that locker room, I would talk to the coach, I would talk to players, I would talk to the GM, Howie Roseman, I would talk to Jeffrey Lurie, who's always in the locker room after games. And what I would have heard was all the bodies that were falling by the wayside last year, how he had to play hero ball, and how that may have contributed to the elevated level of confidence and, dare you say, cockiness that ultimately has led to a flagrant level of regression that has taken place before our very eyes when it comes to Carson Wentz. You won a couple last year, Max, with this year. And I'm saying from just watching the game, I get where you're coming from. But when you take into account the circumstances that existed last year, that may have ended up hurting him so much that you're able to say all the things that you're saying right now about him because you're looking at him now, the contract, the cockiness, the unwillingness to listen to coaches and stuff, the kind of stuff that we've heard. But last year, that may not have been the case. Last year, it may have been, we don't have anybody because every damn body's hurt. We need you to be the hero. Come to the rescue.
We're going to have more
and
on this later.
He did it. That's
over
what
for
happened
Carson Wentz
this year.
However we got here,
think
it's
it is.
over for Carson Wentz.
Disagree.
I don't think it is.
All right, we're going to discuss this more later. Carson Wentz had no games with 0 interceptions, 0 sacks this season. Jalen Hurts did that yesterday. But, fellas, I want to get into Sunday Night Football. Stephen A., your squad was in action. The one-loss Steelers got Marquise Pouncey and James Conner back, but it still wasn't enough. The Bills handing Pittsburgh their second loss of the season. Big Ben, what's going on with your offense?
We need to look in the mirror, and it starts with me. I need to play better football because the ball's in my hands every single play. And so when it's in my hands, I need to make the best decision. And right now, I'm not playing good enough football for us to win.
Stephen A., have you completely lost faith in your Steelers?
I have. And what I mean by that is that I'm thinking, what did I tell y'all? What have I told y'all all year long? Y'all know I'm a diehard Steelers fan. I'm thinking Super Bowl. The Super Bowl, and to me, the only excuse you have to not make the Super Bowl is if you run into Patrick Mahomes. Everybody will forgive you for that. You lose to the Kansas City Chiefs. We understand. That is the prohibitive favorite. They are a juggernaut. They are elite. We get it. But when you start off the season with 11 straight wins, there's simply no excuse. And when you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, I got questions about their secondary right now. We understand that. I always have. But what I've really lamented is the absence of a running game. Over the last 3 games, they're averaging 17 points. They haven't even scored 20. 19, 17, and 15 points they scored in their last 3 games. We can sit up there and debate why, and I'll leave all of that to Max as to the COVID and all of this other stuff. But let me tell you something right now. They don't have a running game. They started out the first 5 games of this year having 100-yard rushes, since, or at least rushing for 100 yards a game. I think they've done that maybe once or twice in the last 10 games. So they don't have a running game. James Conner is serviceable. He's decent. He's not that great, okay? He's certainly no Le'Veon Bell or Jerome Bettis or the kind of things we've been accustomed to seeing from the Steelers running game, all right? Snell and those boys, no, they ain't getting it done either. You don't run the game. You don't run the football. Max, you say it all the time. Mike Tomlin got the job. What did he say Steelers football was? Run the ball, defend the run. Period, if I remember correctly. They're not doing that on the offensive side of the ball. It's put more pressure on Big Ben Roethlisberger, who's prone to mistakes, but I don't even want to hear any excuses from him, which we didn't get to his credit because he said it wasn't him. You got 5 dudes, Ebron, Deontay Johnson, who's struggling. He's got to get his confidence back. I don't know where the hell it's going. Juju Smith-Schuster, James Washington, Claypool. They just ain't getting it done. Their offense is offensive. That's the damn problem.
I can't disagree with what you're saying, Stephen A., but I think you're wrong about having lost faith in the Steelers. Number one, when the running, you're right, James Conner is not Le'Veon Bell. But when you can't get anything going on the ground, they had, again, they averaged under 4 yards a carry, well under yesterday. When you can't get anything going on the ground, that's run blocking. It's run blocking. They're not getting the run blocking. I don't think it's James Conner's fault or any of the running backs' fault. Deontay, he's got to hold on to the ball. You're right about that. But the issue with the Steelers is their short passing game doubles sort of as a running game. And so time of possession, they're among league leaders in terms, and that's what you need to do against the Chiefs, by the way. So I wouldn't Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl. I think we all know that. But I wouldn't totally lose faith in the Steelers along those lines. Really, this is what I think is going on with Pittsburgh. When you looked at their schedule, they were undefeated for so long because they're very good, and they play great defense, and Roethlisberger's had an amazing comeback year, and they had a very soft schedule. Right? So this is when the schedule was going to get tougher. And because they lost their bye, because the Titans had coronavirus, and then later on in the season when they're supposed to have their mini bye, the Ravens got it. They just played their 4th game in 19 days in the tough part of their schedule. And so what happened? They lost a couple. And both times they had early leads and they wore down. That's really what happened. They're tired. And it's a war of attrition at that point. 4 games in 19 days when you're supposed to have 28 days. They took, over a week out in terms of rest. That's what's going to happen. Washington doesn't have a good record, but we all know they're surging, especially on defense. And obviously, the Bills can play. And again, they had a lead. So I wouldn't read too much into that. I expect the Steelers, they still have some tough games coming up, not the Bengals, but I expect them to get back to form at the first time they actually have full rest. They'll still be a little worn down, but they'll be better. And I think once the playoffs roll around, they'll be live.
I'm trying to figure out why Max has faith in the Steelers. Because they're going to get rest? Is that why you think rest is going to make them play better on the offensive line? Or rest is going to help them get an explosive passing game? Or rest is going to help their pass rush come back? This is a team that is a good team, but they're not a Super Bowl contender anymore. What do they do well on offense? They're unexplosive. They can't block. Big Ben, doesn't seem comfortable in the pocket. They don't have a guy that has become like a deep threat, explosive pass game-wise. Their defensive line misses Bud Dupree. They can't rush the passer with 4 anymore like they used to. That's what they are. They're not doing anything well. They went from undefeated to underwhelming very quickly. Still a good team, but rest is not going to bring something to this team that they don't have. To win in the playoffs right now, you've got to be explosive offensively. They can't. You've got to have a quarterback that goes above the X's and O's. They don't. They're not going to beat the Chiefs. They're not going to beat the Bills. I think the Browns are going to beat them. So I don't see anybody in the playoffs the Dolphins would shut down this offense. I don't see the first 4 or 5 teams in the AFC that I feel like they have a chance to beat.
Let me say something else. About my Steelers. Ben Roethlisberger at times was playing like an MVP candidate this year. That clearly hasn't been the case over the last several weeks. He can't move, and he can't shrug off defenders the way that he used to. The combination of the two makes him a very, very stationary target. Now, he can look off defenders. He can go through his progressions. He can still deliver some of the throws. but he's prone to make those mistakes. The more you ask him to throw, the more a mistake is inevitable, which is why it's that more important to throw the football. With Bush and Dupree out, obviously your secondary is compromised. We saw what Stephon Diggs did to them last night. 10 receptions, 130 yards. He did what he wanted when he wanted. They got him the football, and we know what Josh Allen could do. But I'm going to leave it to you by saying this, Max. As you pointed out in the past, because I'm not saying that you didn't notice this, but the more successful quarterbacks are the ones who can move. It's not just the ones who can stand in the pocket and fling the football, particularly the ones that are prone to making mistakes. You've got to be able to move. Ben Roethlisberger got away with it for many years because he could shrug off defenders with ease. It's not as easy for him anymore. They know it. They're coming after him. They're taking away the run, daring the Steelers to pass. And the more they do it, the more they know they can just be patient and lie in wait. And it's working.
All right, we got a heart out here. Dan, thank you so much for being with us. We'll see you on NFL Live a bit later.
To celebrate State Farm's surprisingly great race, we gave this game day jam surprisingly great lyrics.
I want a race that's great. Who is this to free him tonight? Hey, it's Jake. I want a way to save. Got the coverage on my brand new ride. State Farm race. Yeah, they're great. State Farm, State Farm, State Farm race.
Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
If you think you may be depressed, or if you're feeling overwhelmed or anxious, BetterHelp Online Counseling offers licensed professional therapists who are trained to listen and help with issues including anxiety, grief, relationship conflicts, LGBT, self-esteem, and more. Simply fill out a questionnaire to help assess your specific needs, and then get matched with your counselor in under 48 hours. Easily schedule secure video or phone sessions, plus exchange unlimited messages to communicate with your therapist at your convenience. Everything you share is confidential, and if for any reason you're unhappy with your counselor, you can request a new one at any time at no additional charge. Join the 1 million plus people who have taken charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced BetterHelp counselor. BetterHelp is an affordable option, and our listeners get 10% off your first month with the discount code TAKE. Get started right now at betterhelp.com/take. Talk to a therapist online and get help today.
The Chiefs, meanwhile, have one loss on the year, and Miami did give KC a run for their money. And despite 3 interceptions by Mahomes, his squad came away with the win in another AFC West division crown. Max, it seems like a foregone conclusion that they'll be back in the Super Bowl. Talk to me. What would it take to actually knock off this Chiefs team?
What would it take to knock off the Chiefs? An act of God. And by the way, Stephen A., I'm not talking about Aaron Rodgers, but it would take that too. And he was the next thing to it until I saw Mahomes. Guys, Mahomes is so good, it's like he's toying with the league. And on top of that, he has a great coach in Andy Reid and Tyreek Hill, when last checked, the fastest land mammal. And Travis Kelce, at this moment, the best tight end on earth. And by the way, one of the best pass-catching tight ends of all time. What are you going to do? Clyde Edwards-Helaire wasn't great yesterday, but he's a weapon. The Chiefs' defense is a little better than given credit for this year, in fact, even if it's not quite what it was last year. Guys, Patrick Mahomes against a young and hungry playoff contender that can really play defense against a promising young first-round quarterback who played pretty well yesterday. On the road against a Dolphins team that really needs to win to keep pace with the Bills. Patrick Mahomes throws 2 interceptions in the first quarter. They're down 10-0 before you can blink. And by halftime, it's 14-10. And then what was it? By the end of the third quarter, what was it? 30-10? Then they get a little bored and they let the other team back in the game. Usually the Chiefs do that. Usually either in the beginning of the game, in the early part of the season, the Chargers, for example, or later in the game against the Bucs. You know, last night, against the Dolphins, yesterday against the Dolphins. They kind of make it interesting for a little while, but it's like a cat playing with a mouse. They're better than everybody, and even on Patrick Mahomes' worst day of the season, where he threw 3 interceptions, he also threw for almost 400 yards, 393 yards, and beat an excellent team on the road. Chiefs ain't losing.
First of all, none of us believe they're losing. They're the prohibitive favorite. But talk about engaging in hyperbole, an act of God. Okay. Well, you know what? I mean, where did they play this game? They played this game near South Beach yesterday, right? Did God show up there? I saw Patrick Mahomes sacked 3 times. I saw a 67-yard punt return by McCole Hardman. I saw the Chiefs offense generate 23 points. I mean, stop the presses. Oh, my God. What a juggernaut right there. What a juggernaut performance, rather. 23 points. I mean, excuse me. The Chiefs can be beat if you get to Patrick Mahomes. Now, if you let him stand back, take pictures, call the wife, let him know what time he's coming home, all of that other stuff, and, I mean, that's a different ballgame because he's only been sacked 18 times this year, which means we need to give credit to that offensive line for pass protection. No question about it. We get all of that. But what I'm saying is, although they're the favorites and it's undeniable, what I'm not going to ignore is the fact that if you get to the quarterback, you can cause some problems. And Patrick Mahomes has shown some vulnerability in that regard. They lost to the Raiders earlier this year, even though the Raiders scored 40 points to beat them. But some of the time, they were laying some licks on them. Yesterday, Miami was getting at them a little bit. No question about it. I understand it. Again, they're the prohibitive favorites. We all would bet our money on them. Nobody's dismissing that. But to say an act of God, how about an act of Shaq Lawson? How about an act of Jerome Baker, who had 2.5 sacks? How about an act of Xavier Howard, who, by the way, this kid right here is one of the best cornerbacks in football. He's special. Leading the league in interceptions, by the way. The brother can play. And so when I look at it from that perspective, all I'm trying to say is that, again, they're special. But can they be had? Sure, if they don't bring their A game, they can be had.
Did they bring their A game yesterday?
No.
Right. They didn't bring their A game yesterday against a well-coached, hungry young team on the road whose quarterback actually had a nice performance. First-round, high-end quarterback had a nice performance. All those different acts you referred to weren't enough. How are you going to beat Mahomes? What are you going to do? You want to bring extra guys? He's going to shred you. You want to rely on a good pass rush without bringing extra guys? He's got a running back.
I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it to you right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it to you right now. I just got two questions. I want one-word answers, and then the floor is yours. Number one, are the Chiefs undefeated this year? Yes or no?
No.
Question number two. How many games do you have to lose come playoff time to be sent home?
1.
Floor is yours.
The Chiefs aren't going to lose any high-leverage games, Stephen A.
All it takes is one bad day.
Year, for example.
All it takes is one bad afternoon.
Look, that's my point, even on a bad afternoon. Now, the first time they played the Raiders, they may have been a little bit overconfident. The Raiders are built just for the Chiefs since they're a divisional rival. They played probably the best game of their careers, and they beat the Chiefs. And in the rematch, the Chiefs beat them. Mm-hmm. And the Chiefs aren't going to go undefeated every year. But in the playoffs, my bet is they're going to go undefeated this year just as they did last year. Everything you're pointing out, right? Think of how much went wrong for Kansas City. Look, Mahomes went from 2 interceptions, 31 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, to what do you have, 2-3 touchdown passes yesterday, to 5 interceptions. He threw 3. One was just a nice play, but 2 of them, were probably mistakes. So that is a bad game for Mahomes, right? Hilaire wasn't very good yesterday. They were playing a good team that got a good performance from their quarterback and their defense, obviously. And still they won. And yeah, it got kind of hairy at the end, but it was misleading. You never really felt like the Chiefs were going to lose that game. Again, they were up 30-10. All those things I told you were true. They were up 30-10 at one point. They're just not going to lose.
Quote me on this. 2 points. If the Chiefs give up if they spot somebody 24 or 17, like they did in the divisional playoff and the AFC Championship game last year, they ain't going back to the Super Bowl. And if Patrick Mahomes plays like he played in the Super Bowl for the first 3 quarters against Jimmy G and the crew, if he does that again, they ain't winning the Super Bowl. Mark it down.
They talk about a handicap.
You better not play like that.
The other team should say, you know what? I'll bet you if we can jump out to a 24-0 lead this year, they can't beat us because, after all, we're a playoff team. We're good enough to get here. If they give us 24 points, they won't come back on us. And here's the bad news, Stephen A.
All right, we gotta go. Right. All right. They won despite a -3 turnover margin. That's a career worst for Patrick Mahomes.
One app, one tap, that's that. One swipe, one slide, sing it back. One app running with elite QBs. Russell got the cannon throwing clutch TDs. Lillard crossing over, step behind the line. Ain't no need to watch the clock, cause you know it's Dame time, yeah.
You know what?
One app with the 30 for 30s. 2 finger push-ups, Bruce Lee showing no mercy. Fat Five got the crew on deck. Best believe Bo knows OG dual threat, yeah. No one else goes deeper, that's a fact. One slide, one tap, it's the ESPN app. Download now.
To the NFL we go. Both the Dallas Cowboys and the Washington football team came away with the wins yesterday, joining the Eagles. The Giants, unfortunately, the lone losers from the NFC East on Sunday. I want to take a look now at the NFC least standings. Certainly a fluid situation, kind of like Stephen's A-list. Washington is in first, followed by the Giants, Eagles, and Cowboys. This division is always up for grabs. Each year it seems to be there's a new winner. Stephen A., you're up. Who do you think wins it?
I'm going to roll with Washington in this one. Obviously, I'm allergic to picking the Dallas Cowboys. We all know that. Not trying to pick them. By the way, I got my friend Mark Turner. There was an APB out for him, y'all. We couldn't find him for several weeks, being the coward, the weak, pathetic, disgusting, nauseating Cowboy fan that he is. He was nowhere to be found whatsoever, but they win a game, and then all of a sudden my phone is blowing up about how Dallas is only one game out of first place in the NFC least. This is the kind of stuff that I'm talking about when I tell you I despise Dallas Cowboy fans. That's why I haven't answered his calls. I just refuse to talk to him. Having said all of that, it comes down to the Giants and Washington to me. And when you look at Washington, it's just basically looking at the schedule, guys. The Washington did lose to the Giants twice this year, Max. I get that. So they've got to avoid a tiebreak at all costs. But I see Washington winning 2 of their next 3 games. I expect them to lose to Seattle, but I expect them to beat Carolina and ultimately, I think it's the Philadelphia Eagles, if I remember correctly. And so when I look at it from that perspective, I say, excuse me, I think this is something that they can do, all right? Whereas when I look at the New York Giants, you got Cleveland and Baltimore the next 2 games. I don't see you winning either of those games with both of them playing for their playoff lives. They're both trying to get in. There's an elevated level of urgency. One of them is going to lose to the other tonight, which is going to make their games in the last 3 weeks that much more important. And so because of that, I just think the odds are stacked against the New York Giants. That combined with the way Danny Dimes looked yesterday, the fact that they struggle offensively. I love the job that Joe Judge is doing. Again, they play hard. I see improvement every single week. I got nothing but respect for the job that this man has done. But I think that right now, this is not for them. Saquon Barkley is obviously out. Daniel Jones was hurt. He came back, didn't look that great to me. I just look at Washington, despite the fact that you had one quarterback and Alex Smith throwing for 57 yards and another Dwayne Haskins throwing for only 51 yards. That's 108 yards combined at the quarterback position, which is basically nothing. Despite all of that, their defense is elite. And I think that's going to propel them to 2 victories in the next 3 weeks. That'll leave them at 8-8. And because of it, they'll win the division crown.
You're pointing out the reasons that Washington is correctly favored. If you want to just play the odds, they have an extra win. There aren't a lot of games to go. Washington has, at least on paper, an easier schedule, so they should win the division. So I have to admit that this is on my heart more than in my head, right? I think the Giants are going to win the division. I think that they also, they are capable of playing elite defense, even if we didn't see it yesterday. Maybe a bad matchup for them. And their schedule, while you talk about the Browns and the Ravens, and they're good teams, I don't look at the Browns or the Ravens as being unwinnable games for the Giants. And when you look at the schedule for the Washington team, obviously Seattle, they'll be underdogs. Also a winnable game for them, but they're going to be underdogs. But you have to think of the Eagles differently now, Stephen A. It's no longer Carson Wentz starting. They just beat the Saints. They're capable of beating Washington if they're capable of beating the Saints, especially an NFC rival. Rivalry games are different. So I wouldn't just automatically say, well, yeah, the Giants are going to finish with a lesser record. If the Giants can make up that one game over the next 3, as you said, they have the tiebreaker. They beat Washington twice this year. They'll go to the playoffs. So now let's look at why that might be. Why are the Giants maybe a little better than they showed yesterday? Well, and maybe Washington a little worse. Alex Smith hurt his calf. It was a calf strain. He had to come out of the game, right? So what's troublesome is that's the same leg that he had that terrible injury on. That's not just like a gimme, oh yeah, sure, he'll be back and fine. And Alex Smith has played well, but now not so sure. And if it's Dwayne Haskins under center, he really wasn't good. The stats make him look a little better than he was yesterday. Now, let's flip it around to the Giants. Daniel Jones looked terrible yesterday. He looked like he regressed, but Stephen A., he clearly couldn't move. He has a hamstring injury. He was gung-ho to get back. I think he probably came back a week too early. Colt McCoy was good enough to win, right? And as a result, he was stationary. And once he's stationary, that's a huge part of his game. He's a running quarterback. Daniel Jones is very fast. He's a running quarterback. You take that part away from his game, it's not the same player. So otherwise, Daniel Jones this year has been about middle of the pack, maybe a tick below average starter. Right now, he's 18th in QBR, including yesterday's debacle, right? So when you think about what they're going to have under center going forward, Jones, should he be a week healthier, should get back to being about an NFL average starter. Alex Smith's injury, on the other hand, is troubling. Dwayne Haskins isn't ready, and I wouldn't be so quick to say the schedule eliminates the Giants. I think the Giants have a good chance to win the NFC East.
I disagree with that. I really, really do, because I look at this schedule and I'm saying, nah, I can't see it happening. The fact that you've got Cleveland and Baltimore back-to-back over the next 2 weeks with such a level of urgency attached to them, I can't see that happening. Just can't see it. Can't see it.
Well, all you got to do is win one of those, right? And then you got to win the last game of the season against the Cowboys. That's a winnable game. It's a losable game, too, because none of these teams are great, but the Giants are at least trending in the right direction until yesterday. And as I said, there are reasons that they regressed yesterday. If Jones gets healthy, I agree, they're not going to beat the Ravens and the Browns, but I think they can win one of those games. And in the meantime, Washington can lose one of its next 2 games, probably to Seattle and not Carolina. Okay, so once that happens, it comes down to the last game of the season. If that happens, can the Giants beat the Cowboys? And can the Eagles beat Washington? I think with Jalen Hurts playing, particularly against Haskins, if it's Haskins, the answer is the Eagles can beat Washington, and the Giants can certainly beat the Cowboys, tying them at the end of the season with the Giants winning the tiebreaker.
Yeah. I think the conversation is null and void because you're asking Danny Dimes, without Saquon Barkley, a legit number 1 receiver, et cetera, to go against Cleveland and Baltimore and beat them in back-to-back weeks. Obviously, the Dallas Cowboys got 3 games left in their schedule. San Francisco, Philadelphia, the Giants, they could finish at 7-9. Essentially, what you need to do is ensure that the Washington football team is going to fall to 7-9, that they're going to lose 2 of their next 3 games, and then everybody finish at 7-9, or at least 2 of the teams finish at 7-9 with the Giants getting the tiebreaker. And in order for that to happen, that means that y'all would have to beat Baltimore or Cleveland. It ain't happening. I think that's a pipe dream.
Giants got a defense, though. Giants got a defense. Have
right.
defense.
According
will
to
travel.
FBI, Washington will win the division. So we shall see, gentlemen. We shall see, gentlemen. We shall see, gentlemen. We shall see, gentlemen. We shall see, gentlemen.